Okay, so we are on Kuf Mem Amid Beis, 140b, and the Gemara is giving various ideas, advice from Rav Chisda in regards to if you don't have a lot of bread and when you're poor, how to make sure that you're going to have enough to give out, that when you give to people, you won't look stingy. You're going to give ba'ayin yafeh, with being gracious, and so make sure that you don't either don't cut the bread, let everybody take, because maybe you're going to divide it too tightly, or if you're going to first check and make sure you have enough for yourself. Various ideas in the importance of sharing in a proper way. And Rav Chisda said that when that he himself wouldn't give out bread until he himself could check to make sure that he had enough for everyone. So that's where we ended on Friday, and let's begin right there. This is let's see, 3, 6, 9, 10, 11 lines into the wide lines of 140b. Kuf Mem Amid Beis, 140b, 11 lines into the wide lines. Va'amar Rav Chisda, Rav Chisda said, Ana mikor le'hava betzana adashadi yadi bekulamana. I wouldn't break bread and give out to people until I checked that there was enough bread for myself. That va'ashkachi bei kol tzarki, and I found that there was enough bread for myself and for everyone there, and then I would divide it out, because otherwise I'd break bread and be stingy to give and not give enough, and so I wouldn't do it. Bamar Rav Chisda. The Gemara is going to go through a whole bunch of advice from Rav Chisda, some pertaining to bread and some pertaining to other good advice. Bamar Rav Chisda said, anybody that can eat barley bread, and eats wheat bread, he transgresses wasting, because he can eat the barley bread and he's going for the more expensive, for the better product. Rav Papa, similarly, Rav Papa said, Rav Papa was a brewer. Somebody can drink beer, and drinks wine, is also wasting, and transgresses, do not waste. The Gemara says, no, that's not correct, because you look at what's better for yourself, and wasting your body is worse than wasting the bread. So barley bread is not as good for you as wheat bread, and wine is better than beer, and so therefore don't worry about wasting the beer and the barley bread. Be more worried about wasting your own body. Rav Chisda, and Rav Chisda said, Barbe Rav the Leslie Mishra, so a student that can't wash his hands after a meal, so he doesn't have water to wash his hands, oil to clean his hands with, and we saw this earlier in the Masechta and in Brachas, that they would wash their hands, they would clean their hands at the end of a meal with oils. So if he doesn't have that, so nimshi b'mai decharitzi, he should wash his hands in water that are in ditches where there's algae at the top, and that has the same cleaning effect as oil. Rav Chisda further said, if you're going to buy meat, a student that's going to buy meat, Lisbon unka, buy from the neck, because there are 3 types of meat there, meaning there are 3 flavors or 3 textures, and that's a good product. Rav Chisda said, a student that's going to buy some linens, Lisbon medina haraba, buy from the linen that comes from the flax that comes from Nahar Abba place. And then wash it every 30 days. And this will keep the texture very good for a full year. And I can guarantee it. My kitunita. What is linens? Kitana good company. Rav Chisda further said, a student shouldn't sit on a new mat. The mats were made out of reeds or seaweeds, and they gave off a moisture, Rashi says, which was damaging to the clothing, and therefore the mechal yamane, it'll ruin his garments. Some say that it was, if it was reeds, then it was, it would have splinters and it would tear the garment. And Rav Chisda further said, a student should not give his garments to his host to wash for him. The lava because it's not so nice. Dilma because maybe the hostess will see some semen emission on the garment, and it'll be embarrassing. It'll not be appropriate and nice. Now the Gemara tells us some advice that Rav Chisda told his daughters. Rav Chisda had two daughters and married two brothers, great chachamim, Rami Bar Chama and Marukva Bar Chama. And when Rami Bar Chama passed away young, unfortunately, Rava, the great Amora that comes up on almost every page of the Gemara, married Rav Chisda's daughter. So Rav Chisda is giving his daughters advice. Amar Rav Chisda Lebenati said to his daughters, I'm going to give you some good etiquette, some nice modesty in front of your husbands. Besides for eating dinner, where you eat together, don't eat bread in front of your husband when it's not dinner, when it's not mealtime, because as Rashi says, it's going to look like you're stuffing your face, and it's not going to look good for you. Also, don't eat vegetables at night. It's going to give you bad breath. Don't eat dates at night. It's going to make you flatulent. Don't drink beer at night. It'll be a laxative. And don't go to the same place that your husband can go to the bathroom. Don't use that same bathroom, which was a hole in the ground. And if he's going to come after you, it'll make him disgusted in you. And if somebody's knocking at the door, even if it's a male, don't greet them in the masculine, but greet them in the feminine. Don't say manu, which is the masculine who's at the door. Ella mani, but who is it in the feminine? So this way, you're always indicating you're talking in the feminine to a female. In the next line of the Gemara is a euphemism, and he's giving his daughters advice in foreplay, how to arouse their husbands and how to get them their own pleasure. So nakit marganisa b'chadi yade v'kura b'chadi yade. Make sure that he massages the pearls, which Rashi says are the breasts, and the kura. Rashi interprets the kura as the furnace. Whatever it is, it's whatever the word is. Some say that it means fish. Whatever it is, that it means it means down there. And it says has one hand on. They should massage one hand on the breasts and one hand down there, and that'll arouse you. And however, marganisa achvile, show them the breasts first, the pearls. Vikura le'achvile, but don't show them down there. Adam itztaron, until they are really desiring it. V'hadar achvile, and only therefore or thereafter you show it to them. Ein sholen as a karshina. So the Mishnah had said that in dividing the chaff from the grains, you would put them on a sieve or on this plate that was made for dividing the product from the food from the chaff. So masnit and the our Mishnah must not be like this opinion. The Tani we learned Rabbi Tzvi Fischer, we shouldn't be looking at a sifter at all. meaning you can't really use it unless you're using it very roughly without any trying to separate it. But if you're trying to separate in any way, you shouldn't use it. Masnitin, the next Mishnah. Gorfil mifnei apatum, misalkel asalim mifnei harei. Divrei Rabbi Dosa. Rabbi Dosa says that you can refill the trough of food in front of a ox or animals that need your feed, and you can push it aside when the animal has stepped in it, and when they step in on the food, then because they're walking around where their waist is, and their feet are dirty, and so when they step on it, they won't want to eat the food after that because they've stepped in their waist, and then they're stepping in the food, and so you can push that aside as well. So these are muksa questions of moving the animal feed, refilling the trough, and moving it to the side. And the Chachamim prohibit, and the Gemara is going to ask which part of this do they prohibit? Filling the trough or pushing it aside once the animal stepped in it? You're allowed to take from one animal and put in front of another animal on Shabbos. The Gemara is going to explain that as well. The Rabbanan are arguing about the first part, that you can empty the trough and refill it with new food, or on the second part, which says that the animal feed that the animal stepped in and has waste in it, you can push aside, or are they arguing on both and say you can't do either? The Chachamim say either one of these you may not do. However, Rav Chisda is going to say at first, try and say that machlokes is only in regards to a trough that's really a hole in the ground. But if it's a trough that they eat out of that's really a separate vessel above the ground, everybody says that you can fill it and refill it. Really? Is there anybody that prohibits handling the grains and the feed that's inside the trough that's in the ground, the hole in the ground? But then you're for sure going to add to the hole in the ground, fill the hole in the ground. You're definitely involved in something related to plowing and preparing the ground for seeding, etc. Rather, what Rav Chisda said was the other way around. The machlokas is only in a vessel where the Tanakama Rav Dosa says that you're allowed to move the product aside, the feed aside, and the Chachamim say that no, you may not. However, the Eivah Shel Karka, but if it's in the ground, everybody says it's prohibited. So you're allowed to add animal feed, but you cannot move the animal feed that's in there, according to the Chachamim. We have one brisa that says this, that it says you can take from one animal and put in front of another animal. That would be from an animal whose mouth is nice, and move it to an animal whose mouth is not nice. And the Gemara is going to explain what that means. And the other brisa says the other way around. You can take it from an animal whose mouth is not nice and put it in front of an animal whose mouth is nice. Both are saying that you can take it from a donkey and put it in front of an ox. But you may not take it from in front of an ox and put it in front of a donkey. And here's the reason. The one that says you can take it from an animal whose mouth is nice, clean. What does that mean? That's a donkey. Why? The lesle riri, because he doesn't drool. So therefore, when they eat, they eat cleanly. They just they bite and swallow, and they don't drool, and therefore the animal feed is still clean. But you couldn't, and then you can go and take it in front of the oxen. You can put it in front of a cow. Now we go to Kuf Mem Aleph Amud Aleph 141a. The Isle Riri, and a cow does drool when they eat, or an ox drool when they eat, and so therefore that would be the issue. And this it says you can take from an animal whose mouth is bad. What that's talking about is also that you can take it from a donkey, chamor. And why is it considered its mouth is bad? Because it's not really particular about what it eats. It'll eat thorns and thistles as well. And you put it in front of an animal whose mouth is nice, meaning that it's particular about what it eats. In front of a cow that is clean and eats. And essentially, you can move the animal feed. The animal feed itself is not muktzah. It's only after the animal has stepped in it and so it's got soiled. Or it's a slobbering animal that eats out of it, and therefore it became disgusting in that way. That's when you couldn't move it because it'd be muktzah on account of that it's disgusting. The Mishnah continues, Hakash she'al gabe amita li'yinan ena b'yodeh ela shemena'anea b'gufay v'mahayim macha behema she'alav karek sadeh mena'anea b'yodeh. We're going to get to two concepts here. One is a fundamental concept of muktzah, moving a muktzah item with tiltul min hatzad, moving something where in a manner that you're not moving it by hand, but you're moving it with your body. You're shoving it with your shoulder. You're moving it with your side. Some say you kicking it. These would be forms of tiltul min hatzad, moving it with not directly with your hand the way you normally move it, but with another body part. And that would be we'll see in machlokas, but that would be permissible in some cases. And that's the fundamental idea. And the second idea we have over here is something that this has come up many times, items that its primary use is going to be something that's prohibited, but you have designated it for something that's usable. So straw was made for pillows and mattresses, but it was also primarily kindling. So straw itself, if it's on the bed, even though that right now it's on the bed and you want to use it for a bed, so you want to flatten it out and use it, you can't do so by on Shabbos because it's muktzah, because generally it's kindling. And therefore, if you want to get it off the bed, you're going to have to shove it with the min hatzad. You're going to have to shove it with the side of your body. However, if you've designated this straw as animal feed, or you've designated this straw as your pillow, your blanket, and now what you want to do is, in order to soften it and fluff it out and give it some comfort, so you're going to shake it up so that it's more comfortable as a mattress or a pillow. That you're allowed to do on Shabbos. It's not muktzah. So again, we get the concept of something, even if generally it's kindling, and therefore it's going to be a muktzah item. Nevertheless, if you've designated it as animal feed, straw, which generally is not animal feed, but you designate it as such, or you've designated it as a pillow or blanket, then you're allowed to move it by hand. A press, that's a homemade press, not a professional launderer's press. And basically the way it was done is there was a bottom piece of wood that had 4 pegs sticking up on the 4 corners. And there was another piece of wood that had a hole, and basically on each one of the corners. So it would slide down on these pegs directly above the lower piece of wood. You'd put a garment between and flatten it out. Then you would put something to screw down and essentially force down, tighten down the upper wood to the lower wood. So now there's a garment in the press. These were not steam presses or even heat presses. It was just the pressure of the 2 pieces of wood and the screw. And now you want to unscrew that piece, essentially loosening the upper wood so that you can get the garment out. That you're allowed to do on Shabbos. However, you're not allowed to kovshin. You're not allowed to tighten it to create that press. V'shal kovsim, but a launderer's press, which was much more sophisticated and they had a better, tighter process, lo yigaba, that's not allowed to be touched at all, even to release it, because it's a form of construction. Rabbi Yehuda, or destruction for the purpose of construction. Rabbi Yehuda, if it was loose already before Shabbos, so then you can continue loosening it and remove it. And this takes us back to the first line in the Mishnah. We talked about tiltul min hatzad, moving a muktzah item in not directly with my hand. That is going to be permissible. We saw this Gemara multiple times already. The concept is, if you have a root vegetable, think beets or turnips or anything like that, which are pointy at the bottom point of the root, and they are wider at the top. And the way they kept their vegetables fresh, we've seen many times, is that they would put it into the ground, and that would keep it cool and moist. And it was a way to keep it fresh. So somebody put their root vegetable that they want on Shabbos, think turnip, and they put it into the ground. If they put it point down, so then as long as they can grab onto the leaf on top, they can pull it up, and there's no problem, because they're not actually moving anything, and the muktzah item, meaning the ground itself, the earth, is going to fall into the hole, even if that happens on its own. However, if it's upside down and you left the tail, the bottom of the root up, and so it's cone shaped upward, it's triangular with the point up, and so around it you have soil or dirt, earth, which is muktzah, and when you pull it up, you are directly with your hand moving that muktzah item in order to make it to release the vegetable that's on the ground, and that would be considered movement of muktzah and prohibited. We have a teaching in the Mishnah not like Rav Nachman, because Rav Nachman says that you're not allowed to even indirectly move this, because you're just pulling on the root vegetable and the earth is moving on its own. And over here in our Mishnah it says you're allowed to, because it says the straw that's on top of the bed, you may not touch it, move it with your hand, but you can shove it with your shoulder or with your torso. And if you designate it as animal feed or as your pillow or mattress, then you're allowed to move it even by hand. In any case, what we see is that moving it indirectly, not directly with my hands, but moving it with my shoulder, torso, or in the case of the root vegetable, by holding the vegetable and pulling it up and the dirt falls off, those would be permissible. Amar Rav Yehuda, and so we see the Mishnah holds that tiltum and atzad works, is permissible, and not like Rav Nachman who said that if the vegetable's upside down, there's a problem. Amar Rav Yehuda, hani papali medak chada chada. Now the Gemara is going to give a whole bunch of different cases of prohibited actions that, if you do it in a particular way, would be permissible. So the first case is cracking peppercorns on Shabbos. So you can't use a grinder, that we know, because one of the principal 39 melachas is grinding, and so you can't use a grinder. However, can I take a peppercorn and use the back of a knife, back of a utensil, and crush it? So Rav Yehuda says, "Hani palpali the sakina." You can break them one at a time with the handle of a knife. Shari, that's permissible. Tarti also, but if you're going to do two peppercorns at a time, that's prohibited. And Rava Amarava says, keeping the mashani. No, once you're doing it in an abnormal way, that's not going to be a proper grinding. And we've seen earlier in Masechta that grinding is particular. Some say that it doesn't apply to fruits, or peppercorns may not be included. Even if it does apply, this is not going to be a proper grinding, just going to crack it. In any case, so you're allowed to do this, and since you're not doing it with a grinder, which is a proper way, you're doing it in an abnormal way, sort of like the last halacha that we saw, that you're moving a muktzah in an abnormal way, But this is mashani. There it was you doing it with the body. It's not just as abnormal, but you're doing it you're not doing it by hand. Here you're doing it by hand, but you're doing it in an abnormal way. Therefore, Rava says it's permissible even if you can do many peppercorns. Given the mashani afilu tuvanami. Amar Rabbi Yehuda said another halacha. Man the sachi b'maya, somebody who went into water, linagiv nafshe beresha. First, he should wipe himself off, really just get all the water off of his body before he walks on. And then walk through the public sphere. Otherwise, it'll be counted as if he's carrying water in a rabbinic public domain. Well, then we have another problem as well. When he's trying to shake the water off his body, he's also spritzing the water in this rabbinic public domain, and it could end up going Dalet Amos. It can end up going 4 Amos. The Gemara says va'asr should be prohibited. The Gemara says no, that's not true. In a oraisa, in a proper public domain, a Torah public domain, there even throwing something, you're causing something to go 4 Amos, which is about 6 feet, is going to be prohibited. However, in a rabbinic public domain, which is not a public domain in a Torah level, it just looks like and acts like a public domain, which is like our streets. Most of our streets are not a halachic public domain on Shabbos. It's not a Torah public domain. They're a halachic rabbinic public domain. So you can't carry there, but it's rabbinic prohibition, and therefore causing something to go 4 Amos is not going to be a prohibited. Which is secondary. It's your power. You're not actually carrying it, and therefore spritzing water by shaking it off yourself is going to be okay. Amar Abaye said, Rabbi Yehuda, or some say Rabbi Yehuda said, Titcha gabe ragla. He stepped in mud. Now he wants to get it off. Mekancha bekarka, you can wipe it on the ground. But you cannot wipe it on a wall. Amar Rava said, what are you talking about? My time, because why don't you allow it on the wall? Because it looks like you're adding to the construction, you're adding building. It's mud. This is not real building. This is just mud on a wall. Rather, Rava says, you may wipe it in a wall. Because a wall, what are you doing? The wall's firm and strong, and you're just adding some mud to it. It's just a piece of clump of clay on it. But you're not allowed to wipe it on the ground, because that actually is worse, because there you're flattening and smoothing the ground, and that could be seen as a form of making the ground more plowable. It's sort of like tilling the ground. You may smooth out holes in the ground and make it more usable. Itmar, it was said, Mar Berei de Ravina Amar, that Mar Berei de Ravina said, actually, both of these are prohibited. You can't wipe it in a wall, and you can't wipe it on the ground, as for the reasons we just said. And Rav Papa Amar, however, Rav Papa says, mutter. Actually, they are both permissible, because that's not your intention. Your intention is not to build, not to add to the construction of the wall, not to smooth out the ground, and it's not absolutely going to happen. Rather, what you're trying to do is get mud off your shoe. And as we know, the halach is like Rabbi Shimon, that davar she'eino miskaven mutter. That if you're not intending to do the prohibition, you're trying to do something that's permissible, and as long as it's not absolutely certain that it's going to that the prohibition is going to happen, it may or may not happen. So you're allowed to do the action because you're not intending for the prohibition. Here, you're not intending to smooth out the ground. You're not intending to add to the brick wall. You're trying to get the mud off your foot, and therefore you're allowed to. So the Gemara says, okay, so according to Mar Berei de Ravina, who says you can't actually do it on either of these. You can't use a wall, you can't use the ground. So how do you clean your foot? So but my mechanically, and when it says mechanically b'korah, you're allowed to put it on a log, on wood, because wood you're not building and you're not smoothing out the ground. Amar Rava further says, a person should not sit and handle something at the front of an alleyway that has a lechi. We saw this before, and we're going to see more in a couple of weeks as we start the Gemara of Yevamos. The halacha is in an alleyway. Alleyways are rabbinic public domains, and actually they may even be halachic on a Torah level, a private domain, depending if how many walls it has and the structure of it. But it's definitely not a a public, even though public could go through, it's not a Rishus Harabim, it's not a Torah level public domain. So you can carry in there if you have certain things done. One is that you make a joint a meal for all of the inhabitants of the courtyards that open to the mavui. And another thing you need is that you need at the entrance to the mavui, which is this alleyway, you need either a lechi, which is a vertical beam, a vertical demarcation at the opening, or kora, a cross beam. Now the cross beam is nice and large beam and is visible and noticeable, but the vertical beam on the wall at the edge of the entrance is not necessarily noticeable. So the halacha is that don't play with or handle something while sitting right at the opening of the alleyway, where you're you're at the borderline where the lechi, where this vertical post is, because you may not notice where that line is. A beam across is more visible, but a off to the side along the wall, you have a 10 tefachim, 30-inch vertical post. You may not notice that, and this item may fall, and you're going to reach out and bring it back in, and you're taking it from a public domain to a private domain. So don't sit there and do this. Maybe it'll fall out and you bring it back in. Rava further says, a person should not drag or shove a barrel. Because you may be smoothing out the ground and again preparing it for work. Rava says, a person should not stuff in a cloth as a cover to a jug. Dilma, because maybe that's going to get wet and he will squeeze out whatever juices got absorbed in it in order to take out the juices. And even though that wouldn't be a Torah prohibition, as we'll see in a few daf, nevertheless don't do this because you may come to the rabbinic prohibition. Somebody got some mud on his garment. So shake it off or scrub it off from the inner side, but not the outer side. The inner side meaning the opposite side of where the mud is. So the Gemara says, why? You can use a knife to get mud off of your shoe, and you can use your fingernail to get mud off of your garment. So, but that actually a cascade, but you're not allowed to crumble it. So either way, it seems inside or outside. Am I allowed to cascade cloud? Wouldn't you say that you're not allowed to crumble it at all? And when it says you can't crumble it off on the outer side because that's a form of cleaning because you're cleaning the garment. And even though usually cleaning is with water, but you may come to clean it with water, so you can't clean it that way. But if you clean it from the outer side, where you're trying to get the mud off from the opposite side, beyond the inner side, so that's going to be permissible. Element of name. In the name of Rabbi Yana, Megarin Minal Chadash Avlo Yashan. You can scrape off a new shoe, but not an old shoe. B'mamagar, and now we turn to 141b Kuf Mem Aleph Amid Base. How do you clean this shoe? What do you scrape it with? The clean shoe, the new shoe. With the back of a knife. Take away your teaching from this teaching, because this teaching is the correct one. Tani Rabbi Chia taught, you may not scrape off a new shoe or an old shoe. And also you can't put oils on your feet while it's inside the shoe, because anybody that ever had a new baseball glove and knows what you need to do in order to make it soft and usable knows that putting oils on it is going to soften the leather, and that's really you're completing the vessel of the shoe by making it a better shoe, and that you can't do. Or if it's in a sandal, similarly. So what do you do if you want to put oils on your foot? First, you put oils on your foot. And then afterwards, you can put it in the shoe, and what happens. And then afterwards, you put it in the shoe, and as long as you're not intending to soften the leather of the shoe, rather you're trying to put the oils on your foot. When you put your foot in and it's still oily, so be it. Or in a sandal. And you can do the same with your body. You can put oils on your body. And then you can put it, if you have a leather rug or a leather tablecloth or any other piece of leather that you're using, and you want to spread the oils over your body, so you're going to lay down on this rug and rub yourself over it, and as a result, the leather gets oils on it and softens, so be it. It's not a concern. Amar Rav Chisda further said, but it's only if it's just going to shine it. But if it's going to work the leather, meaning it softens the leather, also it's prohibited. And Gemara says, of course, la'abda, you can't soften the leather on Shabbos. That's a Torah prohibition of working the leather. And even just to shine the leather, you're allowed to shine the leather on Shabbos? You're not allowed to. Because that is essentially a form of working the leather. And even though it's not going to be a Torah prohibition, it'll be a rabbinic prohibition at least. Rather, the statement was like this. How much oil may still be on your foot or on your body when you put it into the shoe or lay down on the mat? Enough that would just shine the leather. But if there's so much oil still on your foot or on your body that it's actually going to soften the leather, that's going to be prohibited. But in either case, your intent can only be to put oils on yourself, and as a result, it'll go on your body. Tana Rabbanan, the Brisa taught someone who has a smaller size cannot go out in the street with a large size shoe because it may fall off, and he's going to carry it in a public domain. But you're allowed to wear an oversized garment, because even though it's oversized and people make fun of you, you're not going to take it off and walk without clothing, and therefore you're allowed to walk out with that. And a woman should not wear a tattered shoe because if somebody laughs at her, she'd rather go barefoot and she'll take off the tattered shoe. And she's also not allowed to do chalitza if the man she's doing chalitza to is wearing a tattered shoe, because that won't count as a proper shoe. Chalitza, again, is when a man dies childless, his widow is to marry the surviving brother of the deceased husband in order to establish the deceased husband's household, which since he has no descendants, is lost. And if she doesn't want it, or if he doesn't want it, so then they do chalitza, and chalitza is done where she takes off his shoe. So it has to be a shoe. And if he has a tattered shoe, that doesn't count. However, if she did so with a tattered shoe, and the Tues says somewhat tattered, enough that it's still wearable, but it is tattered, and many people wouldn't want to walk out that way, you're allowed to. The chalitza does work, but it shouldn't be done with that. We should ask him to change into a proper shoe before. Also, may not walk out with a new shoe. So who may not walk out with a new shoe? The Gemara is going to say a woman, if she's never tried it on, because if it's not the right size, she won't wear it. Whereas guys, it seems back when, would wear shoes even if it was the wrong size. Because she would not want to wear it if it's not the right size. And this Bar Kapara says is only if she never wore it beforehand, and so wearing it on Shabbos the first time, never having tried it on, we don't know whether it's going to fit, and she may take it off and say, this is not the right size, it's not comfortable, and carry it in a public domain. However, Aval Yatsa B'Meir of Shabbos, but if she carried it outside, if she wore it once before Shabbos, mutter, because then she now knows that it's a good size and she won't take it off. So the shoes would be made on I forget what the word is. It was a frame that shaped the shoe.
A last. Shoemaker's last.
Yes,
LAST.
a last. And it was on this frame, and usually they would have it very tight. And the question is, are you allowed to take that off? It's an interesting question. Is the product that's complete but still in the machine that's making it? It's still on the form that's making it. Is it already a product, or is it still in the process? Is removing it a part of the process of making it, and then it becomes complete? It has multiple halachic ramifications. One is tuma. Only a vessel is susceptible to tuma. In some cases, it could be shute klietz, just a piece of wood is susceptible to tuma. But this would be it need to be a vessel. The leather would have to be a vessel in order to be susceptible to tuma. When it's still on the last, is it susceptible to tuma or not? So shemtin mino me'al gabe emus. One brisa says you're allowed to remove it on Shabbos, indicating it's already a vessel before Shabbos came in, and there's no muktzah, and you're not completing a vessel, which you're not allowed to complete a vessel. Makah b'patish is a Torah prohibition on Shabbos. And another brisa says, no, you may not remove a shoe from the last on Shabbos. So we say this is a machlokas Rabbi Eliezer and the Rabbanan. The Tanan, as we learned in regards to Tuma, minal shal gabi emus, a minal that's a shoe that's on the last. Rabbi Eliezer Matar, Rabbi Eliezer says it's not susceptible to Tuma. It's not a vessel yet, even though that it's complete. But it's not complete in as much as that it's not taken off. It's still on its frame. Chachamim say no, it is complete in its process, and therefore it's susceptible to tumah. So to over here in regards to Shabbos, the reverse, Rabbi Eliezer was lenient there, is going to be strict here because it's not a vessel yet, so it's muktzah, and when you pull it off, you're completing the vessel. So you've created a product which is prohibited. The Chachamim will say it's already a finished product, it's not muktzah, and I'm not doing anything, I'm allowed to take it off. So this is true according to the Rava. So the Gemara is assuming that in order to take the shoe off, the last, you have to move the last by adjusting it so that it's not tight inside the shoe, so that you can slide the shoe off. Well, that means I'm moving a muktzah item because the vessel itself is made for a prohibited, for something prohibited. What is the last for? Only for prohibited work. And we know a kli, a vessel, shemalachto l'isser, that its primary use is prohibited on Shabbos, is muktzah. I've set it aside before Shabbos because I have no use for it. Now Rava says, such a vessel that is muktzah, I'm allowed to move it if I need it for itself, such as we've seen a hammer to crack a walnut, or I can move it for its place. If the hammer is on a chair and I have a guest and I need the chair, so I can move the hammer off to provide the chair. I need its place. So over here also, I need its place. I need the shoe, so I can move it so that I can get the shoe off. However, so I'm allowed to move the muktzah. That's good according to Rava, but according to Abaye, that says I'm only allowed to move it for itself, such as a hammer to break the nut. But I'm not allowed to move it for its place, which is what I need over here I need to move it in order to get the shoe off. So, so why am I allowed to take the shoe off? In any case, there's a muktzah of the vessel itself, not the shoe, the last. He says it's loose already. The Tani Rabbi Yehuda says, as Rabbi Yehuda says, if it is loose on the last, then indeed you're allowed to take it off because it's already complete and you don't have to move the last. Time of the Rafa. So you're telling me it's only on account of that it's loose. But if not, then you're not allowed to move it. Okay, so this Bryce actually proves Abaya, and it's a difficulty to Rava. According to Rava, well, who cares if it's loose or not? You're allowed to move it even if it's tight because you're allowed to move the vessel because you need its place. So therefore, you can only move it if it's loose because if it's tight, I'm not allowed to move the vessel in order to get to the shoe. But according to Rava, who says that regardless of whether I want to move the hammer to break the nut or I want to move the hammer because I need its place, I'm allowed to move it. So to this last, I'm allowed to move it in order to get the shoe off. So why is it prohibited? My area roughly, I feel low roughly now. So why does it have to be that it's loose? Even if it's tight, I'm allowed to move it for the sake of its place. I need something that's there. And Gemara says you're right. However, I hate the Rabbi Yehuda Mishum the Rabbi Eliezer. It's on account of Rabbi Eliezer. There's another problem. I'm not allowed to move it because I'm completing the vessel by taking it off, because according to Rabbi Eliezer, it's not a vessel until such time that it is off the last. To which Rabbi Yehuda says, that's why he says if it's loose, I'm allowed to remove it because it's already a vessel before Shabbos came in, because it's not tight on the last. Once it's been loosened, then I'm allowed to remove it because it's already a vessel. With this, we complete the 20th chapter of Shabbos, Perek Tolin, and we shall come back to you. Be'ez Hashem Yisbarach.